Good morning, everyone. I think we can get started. Thank you again for joining today. My name is Mai Buchanan, and I'm the Senior Climate Policy Analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO. Today, we will be discussing the Oregon Global Warming Commission's roadmap to 2035. I'm leading this process to conduct the plan and supporting the Commission in its work to adopt recommendations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon. And I'll be kicking off today's meeting with support from Assistant Director of Planning and Innovation, Alan Zelenka, as well as Christy Splitt and Linda Ross. For our meeting today, we have a few key goals. One is we'd like to provide everyone with an overview of the process and analysis involved to develop the Oregon Global Warming Commission's roadmap to 2035. Second, we want to provide a more detailed overview of the modeling process that's being used to support this work. And finally, most importantly, we want to get your feedback on the draft list of actions to be modeled. So we'll start off with some administrative housekeeping, and then we'll walk through the process of developing the roadmap. And then I'll pass it on to our consultants from Sustainability Solution Groups, or SSG, who will then be providing an overview of their emissions modeling process and facilitate engagement on the draft list of actions. So for the meeting today, Alan and I and colleagues from SSG will serve as your panelists, and my colleagues Christy and Linda will be providing support by monitoring the chat and addressing any technical issues that you might have. We also wanted to share that some ODO staff recently participated in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference for the state. And we really appreciated the community agreements that they used. So we've carried those over here, and I'll just cover a few of them briefly, but this is to help foster an inclusive discussion for the meeting today. So we hope that we can all be present and ready to learn, be respectful of others and their views. We think that learning happens outside of comfort zones, and really we're here to listen and learn. So thank you for that. And now I'll go over some meeting logistics briefly. So first off, we are already recording today's meeting, and we'll make it available on the Oregon Global Warming Commission's website, the link to which Chrissy will be dropping in the chat. So if you scroll down to about midway through that website under resources or closer to the stakeholder meeting information, you can find the draft list of actions that we'll be discussing today. Second, we're asking everyone to please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization, and a sentence about why you're interested in this work. You can also use the chat to ask questions. So you can ask questions while we're presenting material. If you have questions about the material that we're currently covering, something you don't understand or need to be clarified, Christy will let us know at an appropriate pause, and then we'll answer that question the best that we can in the moment. Any other questions can be held to the discussion. So when we get to that period, it'd be really helpful if you can jot down the number of the slide that you're referring to in case it's helpful for us to go back. We've also set aside the final 40 minutes of the meeting for discussion. So when we get to that time, Christy will also remind us of questions that were in the chat that should be brought up at that period. And we will have an opportunity for a live activity again that will be facilitated by SSG for other questions and comments. For those of you not familiar with WebEx, welcome. I wanted to point out some key features that you might want to use today. At the bottom right, you can see the chat feature. You can use this to send a message to everyone in the meeting, such as when asking a question. And you can also send a private message to Linda Ross, who is our meeting host, if you're having live technical issues. At the bottom middle of the WebEx window, you can find a reactions button, and that's where you can use the raise hand button. You can also raise your hand by clicking on the hand next to your name in the participant list. And again, please remember that we'll be using the raise hand function in the discussion part of today's meeting. So I'll now pass it on to Alan Zelenka for a few words. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you all for joining us today. We had a great group yesterday, and it looks like we're getting another great group today. So thank you for your participation in this meeting. This slide shows our new mission and what we do statements. Your participation will actually directly contribute to our mission to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. And the TIGGER project will help us advance a set of climate actions that will make up the Global Warming Commission's roadmap to 2035 plan. And that will in turn help us fulfill the rest of our mission. Next slide, please. So what is the roadmap to 2035? Next slide. Mine's not advancing, is yours?
Mine is. I can see.
Oh, this happened.
Slide 8. Maybe there's a little delay there.
Yeah, it's a little delayed. Wonders of technology. So ultimately, what we want to create is a plan with recommended actions across all the sectors of the economy that will help Oregon achieve its climate goals for consideration by the governor, legislature, and other policymakers. So how do we do that? That's the question. If you think of the current level of greenhouse gas emissions that Oregon will emit without any policies, programs, or actions, it's a relatively flat line, maybe a little going up, maybe a little going down, but it's represented by that business as usual line on the graphic to the right on the slide. Then there'll be all the new policies, programs, and actions that the state will take or is taking to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, like the climate protection program from DEQ that will limit emissions from large stationary sources, transportation fuels, and natural gas. And another one would be the expansion of the clean fuels program, which decreases the carbon intensity of fuels from our current goal of 10% by 2025 to 25% by 2035. And another one would be HB 2021, which will dramatically reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from retail electricity. And that will result in a 90% reduction below baseline emissions by 2035 and 100% below baseline emissions by 2040. So we call all of those actions our planned actions, and we call that our planned as business line. That's the middle line there. And that lowers our greenhouse gas emissions significantly and through that yellow portion of the graph. But it doesn't quite get us to the target line, which for our greenhouse gas emission goal, reduction goal. And that's the bottom line on the graph called the decarbonization pathway. So the TIGGER project is the work to figure out what further actions we need to take to fill that gap between the business as usual line and the decarbonization pathway line. That's the purple section of the graph. So TIGGER project is in essence a gap analysis. What actions do we need to fill the gap to close that gap between the two lines and meet our goals? So with all of those actions identified through the TIGGER project, we can then, with the Global Warming Commission, create the plan to meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and that will be the roadmap to 2035. So to explain a little bit more detail about the TIGGER's 6 steps that we're going through to get to the roadmap, I'll turn it back to Maya.
Thanks so much, Alan. So as Alan just noted, there's 6 key components in the process to develop the roadmap to 2035, which we'll be walking through here. And together we're referring to this process as the TIGGER project. And you may be wondering already what a MAC curve is, and we'll be explaining that momentarily. So the Oregon Global Warming Commission is serving as a steering committee for this process and analysis to develop the roadmap. And ODO is supporting this work by providing analysis and project management. The consultant's work focuses on the first 4 components of the process to develop the roadmap. This work involves identifying actions that can significantly reduce emissions or sequester carbon, as well as evaluating the greenhouse gas reduction potential and the cost effectiveness of such actions. It also includes developing MAC curves and analyzing the associated co-benefits that will help enable an equitable clean energy transition. The analysis and findings will provide a suite of ambitious, transformative, and financially realistic decarbonization actions and pathways that can be used to reach or exceed the target of 45% reductions below 1990 levels by 2035. So task one involves gathering and distilling the background information and conferring with state agencies and stakeholders to solicit input and ideas about what those new actions could be. Task two involves where we are now, developing the list of actions. So we are developing a broad list of potential actions that can be modeled and determining the greenhouse gas potential of those actions and really their cost effectiveness over a period of time. And these actions span a diverse array of sectors. This work largely focuses on in-state emissions. And Chair McDonald from the Oregon Global Warming Commission is here with us today, and she is going to add just a few words now about how this work is addressing the natural working lands sector.
Thank you, Maya. The Oregon Global Warming Commission adopted a proposal this summer for a goal for increased sequestration in natural and working lands. And so we are hoping over the course of the next year to develop a process for tracking our progress towards that. We will look at the opportunities for increased sequestration in natural and working lands against that outcome goal. So, and we'll be able to use some of the information that the Commission used to set goals to help us understand the climate mitigation benefits of different types of activities based on research that's been done in Oregon and elsewhere.
Thank you. And task three is what I was referring to earlier, the marginal abatement cost or MAC curves by sector. So what is a MAC curve? MAC curves are just an indicator to help us evaluate both the mitigation potential and the cost effectiveness of an action over a period of time. They show the total greenhouse gas emissions reduced by an action divided by the net present value of that action. So an action's net present value is the discounted sum of the capital and operating costs of the action over its lifetime. It's the difference between the present value of the capital investment and the present value of the future stream of payments, savings, revenue generated by that investment. So really, in a nutshell, MAC curves represent the total metric tons reduced by per dollar resulting from different actions. And the time period from this is essentially from the present day to 2035. And this slide shows an illustration of what a typical economy-wide MAC curve can look like for a given jurisdiction. The colors represent the different sectors. So this is just an illustration of what, framing this might be for Oregon, but the specific actions are what we're looking at more closely today to help build such a curve. So in developing the MAC curves by sector, this involves using financial and emissions information to be collected for potential actions. This can include information on capital expenditures, energy savings or additional costs, operation and maintenance savings, and revenue generation. So altogether, this information will be used to develop the MAC curves for each sector and then one that is economy-wide. MAC curves serve, as I noted, as just one helpful measurement to help evaluate actions. But the analysis supporting the roadmap is going to go beyond MAC curves to help address two really important facts. One, that many of the actions are interdependent on each other. And two, that many actions will likely be needed simultaneously to help achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So to address this, the project also includes an analysis of how actions can be bundled together to achieve the targets. So this illustration that was shown before shows that we want to not just take individual actions by themselves, but think about how together can they fill the purple wedge here to get to our decarbonization goals. And so an integrated energy systems model will be used for this exercise. And task 4 involves the co-benefits analysis. So most decarbonization studies certainly stop before this kind of analysis is included, and the roadmap will include co-benefits to think about how the potential actions to reduce emissions also serve society in terms of the co-benefits that they can bring along, whether that's reducing environmental impacts, increasing equity or community resilience, job creation. There's a lot of different types of benefits that can be analyzed. So that exercise will focus on selecting those, and the commission will be evaluating which actions to include in the roadmap based on the co-benefits and the greenhouse gas reduction potential of those actions. So we think of this as a centerpiece of how actions will be holistically evaluated by the commission. And this part of the analysis will follow guidance from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the best available scientific guidance in this area. So the final step to develop the roadmap. Overall, the roadmap will include, these multiple analyses bundled together. It will not be an implementation plan itself as much as identifying the actions that the commission recommends be taken to help us achieve the goals. So further work will be followed up by that, and we can discuss that more. And I just wanted to show the overall schedule for this project. So it's happening over the next 1.5 years, and the consultant's work is expected to be completed by the end of February 22. So with that, we can just remind you that we have been accepting comments through the commission, but also we have a portal specifically for the TIGGER project, and you can find that on the website that Christy added in the chat. We also want to leave as much time as possible for the interactive discussion, but if any time along the way, you can always email us questions as well. So with that, I will pass it over to the SSG team, and thank you again for joining us today. And actually, I'll pause there to see if Christy has any questions for this part of the meeting.
You're muted, Christy.
I turned my video on, but not my go off mute. I was just saying we don't have any questions. So right now.
Okay, thank you. I will pass it over to Chris.
Thank you, Maya. All right. Assuming everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. So my name is Chris Strashik. I'm with SSG. I've been an energy and emissions modeler for the last 20 years or so, and on behalf of our team, I'm welcome to this session. We look forward to your questions and to getting your input on the work that we'll be doing with Odo and the Oregon Global Warming Commission. So thank you for coming and being here. And I'll pass it over to Naomi to just kind of outline the process and introduce what we're going to be doing today.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris. And yes, welcome everyone. I'm Naomi Devine. I am a climate action planner and engagement lead with SSG, and I've been doing climate action planning for about 17 years. So very happy to be working on this project. Today, we're going to give you 2 presentations. The first one will be on the modeling process itself, so giving you a bit of a deeper dive and understanding of how we've gotten to where we are today. And then a presentation on action development as well, which sets us up for the activity where it will be over to you. We want to hear from you in terms of the actions that need to be considered in the project moving forward. So we'll take you to the state of showing you what actions have already been planned, what are the new actions already under consideration, and asking you to help us fill in the gaps. And we will round out the presentation with next steps, in the project as well. This is a staged or stepped process. So we'll be coming back to the public for further feedback and iterating as we go along. And thanks so much for the compliment on the hat that was just sent to me. I'm glad you like it. It's also cold where I am too, so it's a practical function today in the office. All right, let's go to the next slide. So in terms of getting more specific, what we're here to do today is to understand the project process and how you can be involved, understand how actions themselves are developed, understand the parameterization, one of my favorite words, process for actions, and Chris will talk about that later, so we'll define that clearly for you. Receive input on additional new actions in case anything is missing. But here's what we're not here to do today, is we're not here to decide on the final list of actions to be modeled, and we're not here today to parameterize those actions. We will be looking though for a list of additional actions to consider for modeling. So that's the big goal for today. All right, let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to hand it back to Chris so he can take you through the modeling process. We do, though, encourage questions, so please put them in the chat, as Maya mentioned as well. If it pertains to a particular slide, having that number can be helpful. We can jump back to it, but we'll make sure we get all of your questions answered at the question and answer period.
Thanks, Naomi. So modeling process, to give a little bit of context of what the model looks like and contains and how the actions relate to the modeling process, so we can understand kind of the information that we're looking for. So we're using an integrated systems dynamics model. So it's taking all of these different elements and connecting them together in the best way we know. And so so interactions matter. So if we influence one section, there is the possibility to influence another. So we are capturing those intricacies and those dynamics within the system. So things like population obviously drive energy use. So the population grows, the more energy we use, that will influence the system in a overall. Land use, things like that. So if we remove forest land to build houses, that would obviously influence the sequestration potential that those forests have, or different things like that. So we can capture all those kind of dynamics within the model. As we talked about earlier, so we're looking at kind of filling in this gap here, trying to understand what are the actions that we need to get to our decarbonization pathway. We're looking at the new actions to reduce emissions or to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. So that is the focus of our plan today. The model also represents the state spatially. So we're using counties to differentiate the different areas of energy use and sequestration potential in the state. So we're not just looking at one just big number for the overall state. We're disaggregating down to the county level, because we understand that the state is very diverse. The west and east and north and south are quite different climates even, and populations and demographics. So understanding those differences is important to having a plan that addresses the different areas of the county in different ways. So by doing this spatially, we'll be able to understand that a little better, and that also helps us lead to understanding things like co-benefits and equity considerations as well as part of this planning. So stocks and flows are the key elements within a systems dynamics model. So what is a stock and what is a flow? So a stock is a measure of a collection of objects at a specific time. So a stock of buildings, a stock of trees, a stock of vehicles in the community. Those are all things that we collect together and group and measure as a stock. And stocks provide balance to the system, but they also provide lag in the system as well. And so when we're talking about actions, we need to understand that stocks don't just change instantaneously over time. They take some stocks move faster than others, but we have to understand that when we're introducing change, that it'll take a while for the system to accommodate that change because of the stocks that are in there. Those flows are the actual actions those are the levers that we're going to be using to change the stocks, and they measure the change of the stock over a period of time. So the actions that we'll be talking about and defining are really kind of the flows in the system. How do we want to change the material, the energy, the things that are going into the stock, and how are we to influence what's coming out of that stock? So in the example here, you can see even though we're putting 100% of new electric vehicles into the stock, right away at the beginning, you're not going to get 100% new electric vehicles, as an output. There's a memory within that system that takes some time to to go forward. So when we're talking about how do we define the stock, we need, or the change, we need to understand when that change is going to happen as well. You know, we can't wait to 2035, we can't wait to 2050 to make that change. There needs to be time in between for that transition to happen. So we calibrate the model in order to represent as best we can the on the ground what's happening in the state of Oregon. And the calibration process basically takes all the observed data that we can find. So the observed amount of energy that we're using, the observed number of buildings, and all the different stocks, and we run that through the model and we tune it until we see that what actually those modeled coming out and represents the same thing or equal to each other. So in the example here, you can see if we're looking at the space conditioning or the energy required to heat or cool our homes, we start off with some broad guesses based on statewide data, federal data that says this is roughly how much a home uses, and we say, okay, well, what does that get us? And obviously at the first stab, it's not going to match. And so we tune that intensity, that energy use or BTUs per square foot. We tune that until, up or down until we get our observed energy use equal to our modeled use. And that tells us in that base year, which is 2019 in this case, in that base year that the model is representing as best we can with the data that we have, the state of things that are happening within the state of Oregon by county level in this case. So from that point forward, we're going what the simulation phase allows us to do is allows us to take those levers and tweak them and tune them to represent change that we want to see in the system. So in this case, if we're looking at existing buildings and we want to see what is the impact of retrofitting those buildings, we can adjust that energy use intensity down to represent, an increase or an increase in the, or a decrease in the energy load for that building. And we could see then how that would look like going forward in our pathway with all the various integrated scenarios that we were talking about. So that's a rough, or not a rough, but a high level view of the process. Is there any questions about that before we can move on?
We had one in the chat, but it's been answered by Alan. But if there are more, we've got a moment to answer questions on the model.
Thanks, Naomi. I just for the good of the order, so people don't have to find the chat if they haven't. There was a question about the question that was covered was essentially the economic analysis and how far it will go out. And even though the model will go till 2035, just to be clear, the analysis will go out to 2050 because of the long-term thinking that needs to go into this work. So thanks for the great question, Tim. I don't see any hands up, and nor do I see any other comments, and nobody wrote, just me. So I think otherwise we're good.
I guess I can add to that a little bit too, Tim. So we also, on each of the stocks, they have a lifespan. So a vehicle will have a certain lifespan, a house will have a certain lifespan. And we do, even beyond 2050, we do extend out based on the lifespan of those assets or those entities, maintenance cost or fuel use costs, so that we can, like you said, see what the benefits or the impacts of that economic, or that change would be on the economics of it. So sometimes we even go past 2050, depending on the lifespan of that from an economic point of view.
Great.
And that would be included in that kind of net present value calculation that gets applied to the MAC curve.
Great, thanks for that. And no new comments in the time since we've been chatting either, so I think we can move on.
Perfect.
Oh, I did get another question. It's Helen. Helen's back from yesterday.
Hi, Helen.
She wants to know if we can explain why we're only asking for new actions and what that excludes. And I think one thing I'll say is we are talking about new and planned actions. I'll put in the link to the website again, Helen, if it helps. But if you go to the website, there's like a list that's in Excel that's at the bottom under resources. And if you click on that, you'll see that there's both planned actions and then new actions both. So I think I can answer that question.
So Helen, if there's an action that goes above and beyond what's planned, so you want to expand an existing program or do something different with it, that's a new action. So it's on top of what's already being proposed and being implemented.
And I just want to add as well, we received a question about the next steps in the comment period, so we can talk about that more at length at the next step slides at the end of the discussion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on, we'll talk about the process that we went through to develop that list of actions and what that entailed. So I'm just going to kind of define some of the categories you'll see in that spreadsheet listed on the TIGGER website. So there's two types of actions that we've talked about: new and planned. As we've touched on, planned are actions that are already in the pipe. They've had work done around them. They've had targets set. There's legislation kind of beginning to be formed around those. So those are planned actions, and then new actions will be anything above and beyond that. So either they're not currently in existence, or as Alan mentioned, they could be in existence, but you might feel that those aren't sufficient enough, and so we want to ratchet those up or make them happen faster. So those are the new actions are what we're looking for today. So anything that that's not already currently planned, and it could be, but we want to see more action on those. And I'll touch the reaction impacts. I'll touch on this in a little bit, but we rank them kind of generally as high, medium, and low. And as we said earlier, we're here to discuss what the new actions are that we'd like to see modeled to fill in that gap to get us to our target. So what is a new action? A category of actions not currently be planned or implemented by the state of Oregon or its agencies, which will reduce or sequester GHG emissions. So there's generally 5 steps we've used. So identification of the actions, mapping the actions to the sectors, defining their relative impact, setting the parameters, which I'll touch on, but we're not going to be kind of officially going through today, but just give you a sense of how we take those actions and what the process is for moving forward, and then talking a little bit about defining the scenarios, which again is going to be on part of the next steps, but be good context for the group. So the process for identifying the actions that you see in that list, we did a number of interviews with a number of state agencies that have or are participating in climate action plans of various types. So interviewing them to get an understanding of what's going on, what they would like to do, and things like that. Reading various studies and literature. So plans that have already been produced by the state and various organizations, and then best practices from the work that we've done previously and from other jurisdictions that we've been studying and know about. So mapping to the sectors. So generally we try, even though there can be some overlap and interaction between a number of these actions, we're trying to, for identification and for kind of categorization ease, assign each of these to different sectors. So generally, these are the sectors we're looking at. These sectors closely align to the GHG emissions inventory that the state currently has. And obviously, we might be able to expand this if actions don't quite fit into a category. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We can put them in the best category we think as possible, and obviously we'll capture them the best we can. So the relative impact. So a little bit of thoughts around this. So the relative impact is our understanding of what GHG impact these actions will have. And now this has been, using our judgment from previous work and our expertise, and for the research that we've done in talking to the various, agencies and parties involved. And generally looking at, you can kind of look at an action and say, well, is this going to influence a big stock or a big number of things or items? Then you can say for, with some certainty that the impact on GHG emissions is going to be high. If it's influencing a small number of things or a very niche kind of component, then intuitively that the impact's going to be small. And now the reason that we're using some sort of categorization is because you can see that we have over 100 actions now currently in the list. And we're not going to be able to model every single action, and so we're going to have to prioritize in some way. And then also in that point, there's also a co-benefits category you'll notice in the spreadsheet. And so as part of this, we're also looking at the co-benefits that are associated with the action or the action we're planning to take. And so we're going to be using that category too to also help us say, well, if this the action might have a low GHG emissions impact, but it has lots of co-benefits or a high co-benefit. And so we're going to use that category as well to say, well, this is important enough to include as well because of the other reasons, not just because of GHG emissions reduction impacts. Alan,
And
if you
Chris,
wanted
could
to add
I
anything for
jump in?
Maya, yeah, please.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify or emphasize that we'll have a more detailed co-benefits analysis, the one that I mentioned earlier as task 4. But this is another additional screen to make sure that we don't lose actions that may have low greenhouse gas potential, but really high and important community-based co-benefits potential. So this process allows for us to capture them within the modeling so that they will be included throughout the roadmap planning. And if you were to do it just based on greenhouse gas emissions reductions alone, you would go from the high, medium, low. But again, we want to make sure that we're balancing this with the importance of co-benefits.
Right, just to emphasize, a really good comment from participants on this call would be one that says, I know this one's a low quantity impact action, but it's really important for the following reasons, X, Y, and Z, because of co-benefits like equity or environmental or something else that it really needs to be included in the analysis. So we're looking for people to help us move those up if they warrant it. So, as Chris said, we can't model everything. We've got well over 100 actions. We can't model them all. So if you were a modeler, you did the biggest bang for the buck, the high impact ones would be in there first, then you go to the medium, then you go to the low. But we don't want to just eliminate the low ones. We want to pull them up if they're really warranted in being there. And just again, we're doing a whole nother section in come the first of the year on co-benefits. There'll be a whole section and in stakeholder meetings just like this one to be able to participate on the co-benefits of the actions that we have. That the commission will then be weighing in its decisions to build the roadmap to 2035. So this is just the beginning of that process.
Great, thank you. So the next step after this, once we've finalized the list of actions and we're happy with them, we're going to have to parameterize actions, which is basically turning the qualitative text that we're getting into some sort of quantitative targets or ways of putting it into the model. So in this case, for example, if we're looking at increasing the energy efficiency of existing buildings through retrofits, we need to tell the model what that means. What magnitude of action are we going to take, and when is that action going to start, and when is that action going to end? So basically looking at what are the flows going into it, and how are we going to transition that stock going forward. So we're looking at things like how many buildings are we going to be looking at? So all of the buildings, 3/4 of the buildings, so on and so forth. What kind of building categories are we looking at? How much energy are we thinking that those retrofits can reduce? And when are we going to have that action ending by? So these are the kinds of things that we're going to be thinking that we need to think about when we're defining the actions going forward. A couple more examples. So for example, the clean fuel standard, which already has some parameterization for us, which we're going to be building on. So, looking at reducing the average carbon intensity of fuels by 2025, or the more stringent one that just came out recently is about 25% by 2030. So these are actions that are on the list that we'll be using, parameterizing going forward. And then for example, another example, looking at vehicles. So, how many new vehicles do you think are going to be on the road by when, and how is that going to impact the actions that we're looking at? And then finally, we need to bundle all these actions together and pick and choose ones we're going to be modeling as a package or a scenario. So these actions will be run in the model, and they'll be run on top of each other in an integrated way, and we'll come up with a low carbon or decarbonized pathway. So these are just examples. So we could say, what if we did these actions really quickly? You know, how does that impact us? Or maybe we're not doing, or maybe the speed isn't important, or we're looking at different technologies to replace the ones that we have now. So these could be ways or examples of how we would describe or bundle those packages together going forward. And then that gives us back to this image here. So that would be, so those scenarios would be the final kind of line here in this example. And again, it would be an integration of all of the actions planned and new actions going forward. So looking at if this is our business as usual and this is going forward based on, you know, doing kind of nothing, you know, what it would be like. And then we can see what the impact of all of these scenarios, all these actions mean. And the way that the order that in which we run these actions matters because of the integrated nature of the model. Doing one thing before another can show us different results. So the order of which actions that we run is also important as well in this case. And then finally, as we've talked about, co-benefits is an important aspect of this project as well. And as Alan mentioned, there'll be another stakeholder engagement in the new year, looking at the co-benefits we're interested in looking at and how, you know, how that's going to be integrated into this. But we're already thinking about that, you know, going forward and starting now and trying to get a sense of, you know, what co-benefits can be related to these actions that we're looking at already. And so not only co-benefits, but co-harms are an important part of thinking about this as well. So how do we mitigate co-harms that could be that come about by these, or how we're currently operating, and also some future benefits that would come out of it. So for example, if you're looking at, you know, vehicle use, we know there's lots of particular using internal combustion engines produce a lot of particulates, which are, you know, can be a harmful aspect of our environment. So not only you know, making benefits for other things, but looking at what those co-harms are associated with the actions that we're looking at as well. And so that brings us to the end of that section. Before we move on, is there any questions that that need to be answered relative to this?
Yeah, it's not necessarily relative to this. Do you want me to just take the questions we've been getting during the last part of the presentation like we did yesterday? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, great. So let's see. We have a question about from Tim Miller. Thanks, Tim. Asking if we'll be able to run scenarios and actions required to meet the more aggressive GHG reduction targets required by the latest science, such as 50% by 2035 or 2030, or if we'll just be running to Oregon's goals.
Earlier on, I noted that you know, the target is the 2035 goal that the state has to reduce emissions by 45% as a minimum. So that certainly, you know, doesn't have to be the maximum amount that we look at, but that has been the main target that we've been working towards. I think as we see the results, we can acknowledge and identify if there are actions that could be bundled to reduce emissions beyond that. And again, this is the 2035 target that will emerge as time goes on to the 2050 target as well, which is quite a bit higher.
Yeah,
Great.
you know, every project has a budget, so we need to stay within the budget. But the goal that's set forth by the governor of the interim goal for 2035 is what all the state actions are trying to achieve, and so that's the primary focus of this, is to meet that 2035 interim goal set forth by the governor. And so that's what this plan is going to be about. If we have extra money and time and effort available, we could look at that, but I wouldn't want to promise that at all.
Great, thanks so much, Maya.
Can I just add maybe a perspective or comment?
Sure, go ahead, Kathy.
Nothing in our modeling, it's not like we're going to say, oh, well, we don't need to get more done. So let's go ahead and let's lower our goals for how many cars we get on the road that are ZEB and things like that. So, I mean, the modeling isn't, we aren't going to calibrate it to get to the goal, are we? I mean, we could look at being more aggressive than that without having to remodel. Am I thinking about that correctly, Alan and Chris and company?
we could, but we're trying to meet the goal. And so all the actions that we take could be ramped up and the levers turned so that they get more. But the plan is to try to meet that goal. So taking actions that go beyond meeting the goal is something that the state could certainly do and people can advocate for. But what the plan is going to be is meeting the goal.
You can think of this as a first part of additional analyses if there's support for that.
Got it. Okay, great. Thanks, all three of you.
I think that's something that I'd like to think about a little bit more. So it's an interesting idea, and just thinking about how we may be able to achieve some of that intent, knowing that the goals are going to be increasing all the time, or at least I hope they will be. Not all the time, but periodically. So it's an interesting idea to think about how we could use this process to not just set our sights on the 2035 goal, but given that we know what, we will be modeling out to 2050 and that the levers could be changed, it seems like there might be a possibility of considering what it would take, where we might go next to get to more aggressive goals.
Right, we certainly do additional analysis, and Chris, maybe you could speak to this. So everything has kind of a lever on it. You can turn the dial up and get even more and even more and even more within reason, and on different actions. So that's something that could be a really good potential follow-on action to developing the roadmap to 2035.
Yep, you're right, Alan. We could exactly do that. So.
Okay. Well, great. Then maybe we'll have some more flexibility in a higher goal by 2035 was the specific question, not goals past 2035, to be clear. So then moving on to Pat, he's wondering, or she, I'm sorry, I shouldn't guess, they're wondering if industry measures in the list are noting that the industry measures on the list, the draft action list are very general. Wondering how much sector-specific modeling will be done, for example, steel, cement, and especially for Oregon, the semiconductor industry.
Right, yeah, so we do have, I guess, variety in our industrial sector stock. I can't remember exactly. I know like steel and cement would be, I'm not sure, I have to check about semiconductors with the modeling team, but yeah, we do have granular in there to if we wanted to do actions based on those industries, that's definitely possible.
Great.
But this actually makes a good point, which is that the plan, the boundaries of the actions are going to be within the state of Oregon, things that we can control. So to the degree that there are steel and cement and semiconductor, obviously semiconductor, but there's very limited steel in the state of Oregon production. But so the things that are in Oregon that we can control will be there as well. The climate protection program deals a lot with stationary sources and the top greenhouse gas emitters, and so a lot of what you're talking about here, Pat, will be dealt with in that program as well.
Great, thank you so much to both of you for that. Alan Journay, Southern Oregon friend, biofuels are often defined as having zero emissions, but this ignores emissions in their growth, manufacture, and distribution. Do these models include the emissions from production and distribution, or are biofuels counted as zero?
Chris?
So depending on where the production is, as Alan said, if it's outside of the state, then we're not counting production sources. We do have distribution sources. So for example, we know natural gas has fugitive emissions. We also know things like RNG, even though your pump has emissions. So we do have some emissions related to the RNG. Not so biogenic kind of emissions are ignored in the modeling to, quote unquote, they even themselves out because of the, they were a tree before kind of thing. So that's kind of the best practice these days. Whether we agree with that or not. So that's how the accounting is derived. So we do include some of these emissions, probably not all of them though.
Thanks, Chris. Moving on to the next question. We have quite a few, so I'm going to buzz through them here just so folks have some. Oh, it's okay. Do you want?
I'm just going to make one quick comment. Yesterday, a good point was made. In addition to looking at co-benefits, we might want to consider impacts related to different potential actions. So we could consider things that might be on both sides of that equation that might speak to some extent to what you were raising as a concern.
Great, thank you so much, Chair McDonald. And then let's see, will there be different types of incentives models? So like incentives to generate the changes that we need, are those incentives modeled?
So they're not directly modeled. So the way the modeling works is that we model that pathway, and then the implementation step or stage is to try and understand, how we can get that, how we can make that change happen. So we can model sticks and carrots, or we can try and understand what kind of sticks and carrots we have available to us to help make that change happen. So not directly, but it is part of the process and the understanding of how do you implement the actual pathway that we've modeled.
So another way to think about this whole process is the roadmap to 2035 is the what. The follow-on to the roadmap to 2030 will be the implementation plan. So once we get the actions, we know which ones are the biggest bang for the buck and the best actions that the Global Warming Commission has recommended, then each one of those things needs to have a more detailed analysis, more implementation plan with including incentives and budgets and requests from the legislature. So each one of those things gets done in the how phase, which is post the development of the what phase, which is the 2030 roadmap to 2035.
Great, thank you so much, Alan. And then let's see, Alan Journet, this is something that I know that is something he thinks about a lot. So you'll notice I almost always say GHG emissions. I very rarely say carbon reductions. And this is because I've been trained by Alan Journet, but when he hears us say carbon reductions, he wants to make sure that we mean also things like nitrous oxide and methane. And I just would like us to confirm that.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that was a fair
answer to
your question, Alan. Let's see, Pat wonders if knowing the incremental cost or benefit of higher targets would be useful, or just a comment actually, knowing the incremental cost or benefit of higher targets would be very useful. So as we consider leaning in on that question and Kathy's position that maybe we should be looking at that, Pat seems supportive. Let's see, will increased use of, this is Alan, increased use of RNG will likely increase emissions of methane from landfill or CAFOs or transmission. This is a co-harm. Will that be assessed?
Yeah, if there's opportunities for landfill capture and things like that, and that's an action that the team wants to see, yeah, we can add that to the list and definitely model those.
And there is a DEQ program as part of the governor's executive order 20-04 that requires them to pull forward a landfill gas capture program, and that's being modeled as well.
Great. And then Helen's just is respectfully pointing out that the goal is to be by at least 45% from 1990 emissions for the state, and is expressly modified by words regarding current science. So I think this was a comment that came in when we were having that discussion about the more aggressive goals versus the goals that we currently have set by the governor in the executive order. So I think it's more of a comment just to make sure we're thinking about that. And then here's a question from Greg Alderson. The parameters would presumably be run through cost data and assumptions will be made. Where will this data come from, and how will the consultant team ensure that it's valid for Oregon? And will the cost data and assumptions be transparent and published as the study progresses?
Chris.
Yes. So yes, so the data basically for the financial modeling, lots of different sources. So first will be state level, as best we can, as many state level costs that we can find. And then next would be federal, and then if you can't find anything there'll be studies, for things like, example, hydrogen. There's not a ton of data out there because hydrogen is a very new and evolving science and technology. So, then we'll be looking at papers that best represent the sectors that we're trying to model. So our first goal is always to get as much state level data that we can, and we'll be creating a financial dictionary again of assumptions that we'll be going through with the team here, and obviously that will be made public as well. So that'll show all the assumptions that we're going to be making.
Yeah, so one of the differences between this model and what other people have done, where other people's models use generic state or national averages, what we're trying to do with this is have SSG be able to use Oregon specific data and calibrate the model with the stocks and the flows that come out of it. And to the degree that we have information about the state emissions, we're using that. So it's going to be as Oregonized as possible and not rely on just generic data that's either statewide, national data or things like that. So, and then finally, one of the reasons we picked SSG to help us with this is because this isn't their first rodeo. They've done this numerous times, dozens of times, mostly in Canada, but still for cities the size of Toronto and other things. So other groups, and so they've been developing this model and refining it over the years so that the database is something that's pretty robust and well researched and well thought through.
Great, thank you for sharing that. The final part of that question was if cost data and assumptions will be transparent and published.
Yeah, like I said, so we'll be creating an assumptions dictionary of those costs and passing them over to Odo and Global Warming Commission, and I'm assuming that from there they'll be public because based on the nature of their organizations.
And also the MAC curves, they say dollars per metric ton reduced, right? So that's it. But I gather, Al or Greg, you're talking about the assumption behind getting to that MAC curve level.
Sorry, I got excited about a new question coming in and I missed that you answered it, so my apologies. Let's see, so we have two more questions and then I will not ask any more after these next two, and then we'll move on to the exercise, and if we have time at the end, we can revisit some more questions. Laura and Lauren will get their questions, and then I think Tim just popped in, and we'll wait on Tim if that's okay for time.
Just quickly answer Tim is yes.
Okay, great. So Laura Feldman asks, how does DEQ's current plan to exempt fracked gas power plants like Carty from its climate protection program fit into the Oregon Climate Action Plan? So if their plan is to exempt fracked gas power plants from the climate protection program, will we consider that decision in the modeling? I think it's still under consideration. The climate protection program, the DEQ program?
Yeah, so if it's part of the climate protection program, it's part of their reductions, it'll be included in the model.
Okay.
And so that's so I guess if you want to see that action changed as a new action, so that would be captured as a planned action. And so if you think that plan is flawed and you'd like to see adjustments to it, you can add a suggestion as part of the new actions going forward to say and see what the impact that would be.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so the goal isn't to remodel everything that everybody else has already modeled. So we're taking the work that DEQ and ODOT and other folks have done and incorporating it into our model so that it becomes the base of the business as planned section of that graph that I was talking about at the beginning, so that we can use the great work that's been done by all of our sister agencies.
Great. I guess I just want to follow up. Laura's saying it's Carty's plan, not Oregon's plan. I thought that you were talking about the DEQ climate protection program, but I guess Carty must have their own thing going on. So something I guess we'll have to dig in on. Thanks, Laura. Laura, for clarifying. And then finally, and Carty's, I think, owned by PG, so we can look into that. And then finally, just a comment that Lauren Anderson doesn't think it's good practice to treat burning biomass for electricity as carbon neutral in emissions models. The near-term climate impacts and localized pollution negate the argument that trees eventually grow back. So just a comment from her on that previous conversation that we were having about biogenics. So biogenics is the wrong word, never mind. But okay, I think we can move on, but do know that I see there's some new questions in here. We'll get to them later.
Great, thanks for all the questions, everybody. So I'm going to be passing it over to my colleague Naomi, and she's going to run us through the process of getting your feedback on the actions.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks for the questions. It's leading to great discussion, and now we'd like to add to it. So we're going to jump into Miro. My colleague Penny is going to place instructions in the chat and on how to jump into Miro. And we learned some new things yesterday too about potential barriers, and so we'll have some instructions on how to work around them in case that happens for you. So Miro is a whiteboard, and we'll change the screen. Chris will show it in just a moment. But there's two other ways to participate. In case you can't jump into the Miro board, either because you might be on the phone or having other technical difficulties. So we'll take new actions in the chat as well. And or if you can't use the chat, we'll also take them verbally. And so you can unmute yourself. I believe, Christy, it looks like with *6. Is that correct? Christy, we'll find out.
I unmuted and talked too fast. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Fantastic. So we'll have those two other ways to participate as well. So it looks like I think the link just got stuck there next to a colon, and so it's not live. So I'm just going to pop it in the chat again. There you go. So it's blue. So if you click on that, or sometimes I think for some browsers we learned yesterday, if you get a 404 error, you might have to copy the whole thing, which includes it ends with an equals and a slash at the end. So make sure that you have those in there as well. And then Chris, if you can jump on into Miro and we'll show people on the screen. And so you want to make sure that you have Miro open in your browser. We will show on the WebEx screen though to navigation so you know exactly where we are. And I can bring you to where we are on the board itself. So right now we're just taking a look at the big picture, so to speak. So we have 8 category areas of the actions. And we have also left in the stickies from yesterday's participation. So you'll have an opportunity to build on stakeholder feedback from yesterday as well and have a chance to see what stakeholders also said in the conversation yesterday. So if you've ever participated in an in-person World Cafe, where you show up at a table and there's already, a conversation in progress has happened and you get to sort of add to it, it's kind of like that so that we consolidate everyone's feedback and look at it together. So we're going to go together through the 8 sections with the time that we have. But you are free also to jump to any of the boards that you'd like, either ahead of time or follow along with us, whichever participation style works best for you. Because you might have 1 or 2 areas that you really want to focus on. You might be somebody who wants to see what everything is on offer. So again, you can just choose the type of participation that you would like. And again, if you've got an action for a certain area though too, and can't jump into Miro, please use the chat or unmute yourself and join the conversation. Let us know. We will grab that information and we will write it onto the board for you. So let's start with the top left, Chris. Let's zoom on into building actions.
Naomi,
Yep.
unless I missed it, do you want to give people instructions on how you can not see everybody else's?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like maybe you like that feature as well. So
Yes.
Yeah, we'll show that too. So yeah, right now Chris has toggled on. We can see all the people in the Miro board right now. So you can see those little cursors with colors and names. So you're anonymous in Miro, except for our team. You'll see our team's names next to our cursors. And if you don't want to see that on your own board, you'll go to the top right and see where Chris is sort of circling around a blue arrow with some lines on it. And if you click on that, they'll disappear. So he'll click on that now and they'll disappear. So you won't see the cursors live if you don't prefer to have that. So we already see a number of you in there, which is great. Another tip for Miro here too is that you'll notice in the bottom right of Chris's screen, you see the entire board. There we go. He's over there on it. And it's got a plus or a minus sign that allows you to zoom in. So very similar to map functionality if you're using Google Maps. And so the plus and minus takes us in or out. And there's one that fits to the entire screen that's next to the minus as well. So if you wanted to kind of again zoom out to the large picture, and Miro will adjust to whether or not you're using a trackpad or a mouse. It'll automatically figure out those things and it might ask you that question. And so let's go over to the top left to building
And I guess
action.
just one more thing to move around, what you can do is using this feature in the bottom, if you want to grab the square, that'll move the frame to where you are, or you can just grab the canvas in general, and that'll allow you to scroll around.
Thanks for that. That's great. So I have functionality that allows me to pull you to where I am, sort of like an invisible hand, which I just used to bring you over to the building actions area so you can start with us. I won't do that too often because if you've decided to participate on another board, I don't want to pull you away from it if you're deep in your thought. But just to start off on the same point here, let's zoom into the planned actions. And I'm just going to give you an example of how they've been constructed, and you can read them for the rest on your own. So for example, one of the planned actions is reduced embodied carbon of building materials. The co-benefits associated with that are improved indoor air quality, local economic development. Jumping over to the right of the new actions for the building categorization is, for example, increase new building efficiency, and the co-benefits associated with that are reduced operational costs and reduced impact on electricity grid. If we move over to the right and zoom in on what participants said yesterday, you'll start to see what some of the suggestions have been. And so, for example, we've got one like replace wood or gas stoves with electric, and someone started to identify a co-benefit around health for that. So you're free to, of course, make your suggestions here on each of the boards. And so each of the categories has that set up. It shows you the planned actions. It shows you the new actions that are already being considered, and then there's a space for you to add additional new actions for consideration. The simplest way is to use stickies. So Chris will grab one at the bottom there and underneath the additional. So each of the additional panels has stickies there. Yep, and he's grabbed one and he's dragged it up onto the board. If you double click inside of a sticky and then begin typing, it will automatically adjust. So you don't need to worry about adjusting the sticky right away. You can begin typing your idea as long as you would like, and whatever explanation you would like. We would ask, it's easy though if you don't make your sticky humongous, because it starts to block other people and we can't move it. So please try not to do that. Thank you for that example. Just makes it easier for co-participation. But even if you had to, of course, put a sticky idea right beside the board, it's all going to get counted. It's just we wanted to create one space to consolidate and sort of have a chance for you to take a look at other actions from yesterday and what participants have said. All right, I don't see any actions coming in the chat yet at the moment, so we're constantly monitoring that too. But just a reminder that if you are having trouble, please let us know. Penny's here to help as well. So buildings actions is that first area. Chris, if we can move on down below. So if you go directly below is energy action. So if that is your jam, we see there's quite a bit. There's so for planned actions, the first one there is implement a cap on greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels, co-benefit being stimulate innovation and economic development. You'll see under new, we've got install offshore wind energy off the Oregon coast as one of the actions. Co-benefits for that being economic development, improved air quality, improved health. Just going right across the top too for the second table there, deploy clean hydrogen fuel cells for homes. Co-benefits for that, reduced air pollution, outdoor air quality, and health benefits. And then just taking a look at the additional actions from yesterday, just some of the conversation is eliminate methane gas from new construction. Seems like methane came up a couple of times. All gas generation facilities should be included. So commentary on that, they're not in the CPP. Clean renewable energy that provides benefits for low-income, BIPOC, tribal, and rural communities, community-owned, and job creation. So we start to see some of the co-benefits, people suggesting those in there too. These are all locked down too, so you don't need to worry about accidentally grabbing one and moving them. We've locked them there, so you're free to also add yours in there as well without worry of accidentally moving another one that was from yesterday. And so again, below that, if we zoom out a little bit on the additional actions for energy, Chris, you'll see again, the stickies are there, ready for you to participate and add at any time. Okay, moving down, let's go down to the next one. Transportation actions, also a big area for consideration. So a couple of planned actions: implement the multi-state medium and heavy duty zero emissions vehicles action plan. And of course, co-benefits being improved air quality, improved health outcomes. Another one is expand Oregon passenger rail, and co-benefit is improved accessibility. Some of the new actions already being considered: implement an electric mobility strategy, and co-benefits being increased accessibility, increased walking and cycling and health benefits, improved accessibility for low-income households. And again, same idea. So if we scroll to the right, you'll see where you can add additional actions for consideration, and you'll see what stakeholders had said yesterday in the conversation as well. So you can either build on that or you can suggest something new. Let's go down to the next one, last one in this column, forestry and agriculture. And so one planned action is to maintain and expand the urban tree canopy, co-benefits biodiversity, water quality, the heat island effect. A new action, avoided grassland conversion. So again, co-benefits biodiversity, health benefits, and animal welfare. We had quite a bit of participation on this board yesterday if we move to the right for additional actions. So please feel free to take a moment there too, or any area that intrigued you the most, to take a look at where the conversation currently sits, and then please do add yours. And then let's move right over to the right, Chris, and we'll go over to waste. It's great. I see a lot of you following along with me. I still have it toggled on to see how many people in my view are. All right, and I'm just going to pause to take a look at the chat too as well. Okay, so it looks like Chris has been answering the questions there too.
Just one at the end was, will we be able to access the mural board after the meeting, just to review in more detail other people's suggestions?
Just a quick answer on that. Yes, we will be posting it to the same web link that was shared earlier from the Oregon Global Warming Commission's page. And the one from yesterday should actually be on there already.
And I think the cutoff date or the cutoff is the end of today for feedback, Maya. Oh no, sorry, we
No,
moved to next week.
Midday,
Yes.
noon on December 13th.
Right. Yes, that was the old date.
Great, thanks very much for the question, Maeve. All right, so taking a look at waste here. Reducing food waste, one of the planned actions. Some of the new actions for consideration: manage emissions from embodied carbon, capture methane from biogenic waste streams for RNG, or that's the short form for renewable natural gas. And scroll over to the right. You see, you've got a few suggestions from yesterday, so definitely, if waste is something that is a big interest or passion for you, definitely want to hear what additional actions should be considered. Let's go on up to the next section, materials actions. And Chris, did you want to explain a little bit more about what we mean by materials actions?
Yeah, so materials action is this is kind of a newer area of modeling. So we're looking at different materials that we're using in buildings. So it's a little bit on the consumption based inventory, even though we're not doing a whole consumption based model about all of the materials that we're consuming. We can do a little bit around building materials and things like that to try and understand what the impacts of emissions are around that.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, and let's move on up to the next section. Land use. So we can see implement climate-friendly areas being one of the planned actions, co-benefits being increased transportation options, reducing the floor area of homes, and preserving natural working lands. For new actions, we've got coastal wetland restoration, with biodiversity and recreation being co-benefits, preserving carbon-rich ecological areas, same co-benefits for that one, restore sagebrush, biodiversity being a co-benefit, and restore tidal wetlands, biodiversity and recreation again as co-benefits. And so we'll move over to the right. We've got some good discussion already happening from yesterday and today. I've seen happening too. So please dive in there. And then lastly, let's scroll on up to industry. All right, last stop on our tour here. We've still got time though, of course, for actions to be added. And for you to take a look at the current state of the conversation. So deploy community climate investments, co-benefit being economic development. And then another planned action is require alternative refrigerants and that would stimulate innovation as a co-benefit. In terms of new actions, increase the efficiency of industrial processes, co-benefits being reduced operating costs, increase the efficiency of lighting in industry, again, reduced operating costs as the co-benefits, improve the energy efficiency of industrial facilities, same co-benefit as before, and then deploy green hydrogen in industry and stimulate innovation would be one of the co-benefits. So we've certainly got lots of space for lots of ideas or actions in industry as well. So now that we've taken a tour or two as well, I can see many of you across the board, sort of at different areas, which is fantastic. And so we've still got about 6 minutes or so for this, but we can also take questions. Christy, I just wanted to come back to you to check. Were there a couple of questions still hanging too from before that we could also answer now?
Yeah, I think there was just one. So let me scroll back up.
Great, thank you.
Life above Miro. Let's see. It was mostly comments. So there was Tim's question about anticipating how costs will decline over time, and the answer being yes, that would be considered. And then there was a question about if we're considering methane leakage in the modeling.
Yeah, as you pointed out, Arlene, there's been, I guess, evolutions in the thinking and the calculation of methane leakage, and we are incorporating that into our work as well.
Thank you. And then the last two are comments, one from Alan Journay. DEQ only models emissions from combustion, so all their models are flawed in his opinion in relation to life cycle emissions. And then Grace said, just agreed with Lauren's comments about burning biomass, and that I think not considering the emissions impacts also on her mind. And then I think that's it on things that aren't just related to Miro.
One comment on leakages. So there's different types of leakages. There's pipeline leakages and there's distribution system leakages. And depending on the nature of the pipeline systems, some leak more than others. So the old cast iron systems that are pretty prevalent in eastern United States are really prone to a lot more leakage. Some a smart person in the PUC about 15 or 10 or 20 years ago, I can't remember exactly when, required Northwest Natural to replace all their steel pipes with PVC plastic pipe, which leak a lot less. So to the degree that we're looking at Northwest Natural system, they're different than a lot of the old systems in the back east.
Thanks for flagging that, Alan. We did get a new question, and of course, I know background noise is generally not too bad, but of course, my neighbor has landscapers right outside my window currently, so sorry if you do hear that. Alexander asks, is there capacity to identify points of diminishing return in the modeling of response leveraged per unit of input for each program action for current Oregon targets? Somebody might want to look at the chat because it's a little complicated there as they answer, but identify most efficient opportunities for expansion of programs beyond current targets where targets are below this point. I could also ask Alexander to come off mute if that would be helpful. Yeah. Alexander,
yeah.
I'm going to unmute you so that you can give us a little bit more context for this. Thanks. You should now be off mute.
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no problem. Go ahead
Can you hear me?
and ask us your question. Yep, we got you.
So just in the modeling, looking at the response leveraged and the cost for each action, at some point there is a diminishing return for that. Is that being identified in the model where that is, and then kind of using that, comparing that to our current goal, seeing how those align? And then maybe using that to identify opportunities for setting new goals.
You can be an example of that, Alexander. I'm still not sure. I still don't know if I understand what you mean.
I think that maybe the question is getting at how do you consider cost, which is one of the outputs, when it's dynamic over time relative to the benefits, and that, you know, if we're including the benefits, the financial benefits of an action, and those decline over time for some reason, because of, the marginal next investment doesn't produce the same result, is that, are we considering that over time?
Right, and maybe if you think about it, Chris, how do your adoption curves work? So over time they go up, but then the adoption rate starts to wane, and then
Right.
but you're paying the same amount for getting that next increment, and then it starts to go down.
Right.
And just
Yeah.
as a high level, oh,
No,
sorry,
go
Chris.
ahead.
I was on mute earlier, and just trying to note, that's the economic design actually of a marginal cost abatement curve, is to be able to parse out the marginal greenhouse gas reduction benefit with a unit cost. So that's why at a high level, these kinds of exercises exist, but I'll let Chris get into more of the details of their approach.
Yeah, I guess building on what everybody said there. So, if you think of an adoption curve as an S curve, so that, there's lots of things going on. So adoption rates change over time. Costs could change over time. For example, if you think of electric vehicle adoption, as you get more adoption, we are also projecting the cost of electric vehicles to come down, and so that'd be either on parity or cheaper than in a conventional vehicle, as they probably get more expensive as people use less of them. So those are all considered. We do show, I guess, the economic benefits and the emission reductions, the energy reduction. All of the things will be we measure and capture kind of on a yearly basis. So we can show kind of, I guess, those charts, and you can, I guess, do that analysis. I've never done that analysis, but you could do that analysis to say kind of where that tipping point is between where it's most efficient and where you can expand your programs. So there is the ability to do that. I don't think that's kind of the goal of this, but it could be kind of a further analysis going forward.
And then
That's more on the implementation side. And so then you would, figure out the real curve of how you do incentives for EVs. I mean, eventually, if EVs become cheaper, then internal combustion engine cars, you won't be incentivizing them as much. So that'll be more in the implementation phase, detailed implementation.
Great, thanks, Alan. And then, and Chris, Sylvia and Craig had the same question at the same time. We'll start with their mutual question, and then Sylvia had a second question. But under land use actions, what's the difference between coastal wetland restoration and tidal wetland restoration?
I think you've identified something that we need to consolidate. There are coastal wetlands that don't have the same greenhouse. All coastal wetlands don't have the same sequestration benefits. It's those that are above a certain salinity. But I think we're primarily targeting those tidal wetlands when we're talking about that as an action. So we'll probably consolidate those to make it clear that we're focused on the tidal wetlands that have a lot of sequestration potential.
Great, thank you so much. And then Sylvia had also asked, will you unpack the preserve carbon-rich areas by landscape type for modeling purposes?
It's a good question.
I guess.
Know that we'll have to talk that through, because I think we are talking about a number of the different pathways, and each of those would have very different benefits. So I think we're going to have to do that in how we model things.
Great. And then the last question we have is Megan Kemple. Hi, Megan. Good to see you. And Megan's just wanting us to clarify the process and timeline, which is exactly what we do to wrap up this meeting. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop in again the link to the draft list of actions so that you have that handy. Oh, and then another question popped in. How is the model going to account for emissions and sequestration on federal lands?
that would be included as a potential action. We could separate it out well, we could target an action that's specific to federal lands that might, as well as one to private lands and state lands. So we could certainly do that.
And then we did get feedback about the that from today till the 13th is a short turnaround. We can have the discussion internally if we're able to extend that. I want to be clear, this is something that was actually shared at a public meeting in November. And so this isn't when the date started by which it would be getting in the comments, but it might feel that way if this is news to you. So what I'll say is I don't think we plan on extending the deadline because we have work to do to keep things on target to hit our timelines. However, this isn't your last chance at this particular conversation. This is just the very first step. So there'll still be plenty of time to give comments and to share feedback beyond that date on the 13th. Because this is going to be like a long process with a lot of public input that we really want to get. So just want to make sure you know that even though that deadline might be there, we still want to hear from you. So when you see, I'm going to go ahead and pop in a link to the portal that will close on the 13th, but I'll also pop in an email address. So if you want to give feedback after the 13th, we might not be able to use it for this initial piece, but we can certainly keep it in mind as we go forward. Hopefully that's a helpful balance.
And the commission will be discussing this on January 6th, and we will have a public comment period during that meeting, as well as taking written comments.
And just to be clear, what we're asking for is not analysis. We're merely looking at, did we miss anything on the list? Is there something on there that you think that should be on there that's not on the list? So asking clarifying questions, we'll get to you as fast as we can, but this is an analysis part of it. So there's not a lot of, this is just about, is there stuff that should be added that's not on there already? And then we'll be getting into the analysis and the co-benefits portions of it as well, but those will be separate parts of this. Right now, we're just focusing on the list.
Yeah, thank you all so much for setting that up really well. Just other items to add are, again, we're looking at the new items to add, but we of course also welcome other comments that you want to provide on co-benefits, data transparency, all of these great comments you've already added today. Those are always welcome. The portal will be live throughout this whole project and plan development period. So we're hoping to get that input by December 13th to inform the next, task 2. And then we will continue to be providing additional public comment period deadlines for the additional tasks within the TIGGER project. So hopefully that is clear. And again, please feel free to reach out to me or others to help clarify that.
And I'd just add, I think the reason that we're trying to be pretty aggressive with this timeline is in the hopes that we can get enough progress made so that we would be able to make good recommendations on important next steps in the 2023 session. So we're trying to balance the urgency of needing to act and the timelines that we're putting into this planning effort. But as Maya said, there are going to be many more times to engage through the process to continue to provide really helpful perspectives the last 2 days, and looking forward to getting more as the process goes on.
Right, and underscoring what Chair McDonald said, having this be able to impact the 2023 session means we need to have pretty much final draft at the end of the year, with finishing off after the first of the year, but be able to impact what legislators or agencies or other folks might want to do in terms of programmatic bills or funding bills. We need to, it's a pretty aggressive timeline to get there. So even though it seems like 2023 is like way off, it's not.
On the corner. So just following the items on this slide to give you that broader context. We've talked a lot about our goal today and this month to refine the list of actions to be modeled. Then we will be modeling the actions. defining the scenarios that can help support that, the bundling process, and really the whole package with SSG support to get us a nice foundation for the next stages of the TIGGER project and the roadmap. So thank you again so much for your time today, and we're just a minute from 11, and you know, please feel free to continue to share your input, and I think with that we can adjourn.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all the feedback and the conversation. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Alan, Janae, I just popped the portal in again. Also, if you just Google Oregon Global Warming Commission, you can find the page for this. I put in TIGHGER to find it really easily, TIGGER, the acronym. But the portal is just on the website. So if you're not seeing my links come through, I'm scared if I tried to send you that main link, you won't get it. But I did just put that back in. And then also we had just a quick comment right at the end about reaching out to NGOs and leading companies working in each area for comments. So I know we have an outreach strategy, and we've been certainly doing some of those conversations and sending out the emails versus just expecting people to come. So thanks for that tip, and we'll keep at it.
And Naomi, there's people still playing around in Miro, so you're gonna keep that open for a while.
We're going to keep that open till the 13th.
Yeah.
The end of the day, 13th. So
Just open. You
Yep.
can go back to it
people,
anytime.
it's public. People can go in anytime and add their thoughts, and we'll close it after that, and we'll collate all that information. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's a website. It never closes.
Yeah, that's right.
24/7.
Yeah, that's right. We can, though, of course, turn it to a no longer public link, but the link itself stays the same, and we keep the permissions open. And then what we do too is we lock down the submissions that have already been made so that they can't be changed. Like nobody can come in and erase them, for example, but people can continue to add. Yep.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah. Great
Thanks for the
discussion.
participation, everyone.